Juist in deze onzekere tijden is het belangrijk om elkaar te blijven ontmoeten, te informeren en te inspireren over hoe we het morgen slimmer en beter kunnen doen. Welkom bij de livecast van Pakhuis de Zwijger.
Goedenavond iedereen. Dankjewel voor je kom. Here you are by Who's Mental Health. Meestal we will praten in Engels, maar ook een beetje in Nederlands. En ik ben Gloria en ik kom uit de groep, the International Anti-Racism Group. And tonight we're going to talk not only about the issue of racism and how does it impact the world and the working place for psychologists and those involved in anything regarding mental health in the Netherlands. So can I have the first slide? So what this shows you are different types of ways in which a psychologist might look at you. What types of things they might be looking at when they're examining you. And these are the most common types of psychology that someone might be treated with. I want you to note one very important thing in this, which is part of our subject, which is if you look at all the names of all the people there and their various subjects and the names of the psychologists, the one thing that they all have in common, they're all white guys, all of them. They're like all white guys. I'm like, come on now. So, it's important that we understand that a lot of times when we're looking for mental health and we're seeking it as people of color and also as somebody who might really require an alternative way of thinking, we're mostly getting the work of white guys. Next slide, please. I don't want to throw you guys with too many stats because I know that's a bit much. And I know we're looking at a lot of stats right now in Corona time. Oh, and big ups to anybody and everybody who's been affected by the virus as well. Going back to this, the important thing for me is to look at the Asian American and Pacific Islander population. Again, this is looking at the U.S. And then look at the 13%. Who've actually had a diagnosis in the past year. And that's incredible when you think about out of 100%, that's that 13%. Next slide, please. And this is looking at diversity of the psychology workforce. Again, this is an English chart from the American Psychological Association. Again, the numbers are low and too low when it comes particularly to those not those who maybe sought an education or who pursued a degree in psychology, people of color, but actually those who were actually working in the workforce after they received it. There's an incredible and sad drop-off of the numbers that are shown in this. We can go to the next one. Now, mental wellness. We're here to talk about as well what mental wellness is, but also how do you seek that if you are, let's say, a person of color, an immigrant, a trans person, a person who is all of those things? Mental wellness has to really do with where can I have all of the needs met. And also, I think we can all understand it's really difficult if you're a person of color and you have to explain to your psychologist what the daily trials and tribulations are for a person of color, not only in the Netherlands, but unfortunately everywhere in the world. So mental wellness is something that is not only important for all of us, but also we'd like to think it's something that is developing in the Netherlands as well. Okay, that's right. We zijn in the Netherlands, huh? So far, I've given you examples of things that are outside of the Netherlands. So the International Anti-Racism Group, the group that I represent, we actually did ask. There's an organization called the Netherlands Institute of Psychology. And when we asked them a pretty simple question, and the question was, can you tell us about the workplace of psychologists in the Netherlands and racism and how that impacts them? Can you give us any numbers about the amount of psychologists of color? Questions in that area. And this was their response. The NIP has no information about racial and cultural diversity statistics of the psychological professional execution. The Dutch law knows or allows only very strict limitations in registering racial, ethnic, and gender-specific characters of people. The Netherlands Institute of Psychology has no statistics about racial and cultural diversity in the psychology workplace. Also, the Professional Code of Psychologists does not allow this type of sensitive, private, personal characteristics to be registered and shared without the clearly expressed permission of clients. Well, I'm going to, before I pass it over to Max, I'm going to read you the type of statistics we were actually requesting, and these are from America, again, the American Psychological Association, and these are from 2016, to now. Nearly 90% of American psychologists are white. About 86% of psychologists in the United States are white. Only 5% are Asian, 5% are Hispanic, 4% are Black, and about 1 to 2% are what they just throw into category of other. So Max is gonna, with those, and those are the numbers that we were actually asking the National Institute of Psychology for. So that's in response to that type of reply. Max, can you please tell us more about tonight's program?
Yes. Thank you, Gloria. As you've seen, Gloria has a lot of energy and she's very passionate also about this topic. She has also been, she hasn't told, but the initiator of this event. And because she said, and especially this was going to be a program during the week against racism originally, but it had to be canceled due to the corona. But she said we have to, especially in this time when people are in isolation, to be able to talk about this subject. And with this... we said, well, let's do it. And so this edition that should have been part of the Week Against Racism, we made it part of the Institutioneel Racism series, of which this is the 4th and last edition, of which you can see all the previous editions online as well. Yes. And also for those who are watching now and said, oh, my friend can't watch it now, you will be able to watch it back later on YouTube. And also, if you are watching now, you can participate and ask questions. That can be via the We Promise Facebook page. And when you send questions, I will get it on this iPad and I will read them out and try to see...
as we can.
Bring in the questions towards our speakers from the audience. So the main language will be in English. But you can ask your question also in Dutch, and I'll be either translating it for you, but most speakers can also follow both Dutch and English.
Je kan antwoord geven in Nederlands is altijd goed. Yes. Het is okay, huh?
So both languages are welcome. Yeah. About the program itself, well, the goal is, of course, to look at the experience of people of color. She gave a lot of statistics of the US, but we will also look at the Dutch context, for which we will have later presentations, experts, people who sought help, people who have done alternative initiatives. We will be doing one-on-one interviews with different people and guide you through that way. So that's about today's program. So what I want to do now, before we start off, because next to an organizer, Gloria is also a wonderful poet.
Oh, thanks, Max. I hope I live up to that. Thank you.
Yeah, I have good memories of last time, so good. I have good expectations. Gloria, please go ahead with your poetry.
Thank you, Max. Can I have the first slide, please? It's beginning to look a lot like Christmas. The city mental chief, a black woman. Next slide, please. June Jackson Christmas, oh June Jackson Christmas. She was the first black woman to head mental health care services in New York. Next slide, please. Dr. June Jackson Christmas, oh I thank you Jackson Christmas. Before you, I didn't like Christmas at all. But Dr. Dr. June Jackson Christmas. You could young Ian as you wanted. Dr. June Jackson Christmas. You started some new ways in Harlem with one A. Dr. June Jackson Christmas. You didn't let them stop you at all. Dr. June Jackson Christmas. Oh, we need more Christmas like you. Every, next slide please, damn day. And she was a socialite. That's her with Dinkins there as well. Thank you, Dr. Christmas.
Thank you, Gloria. I don't know if you can hear it, but that's an applause from here. And that's what it can mean to have someone being able to speak to. To go off to the next section and to talk more about the Dutch context in relation to mental health care, we've invited our first special guest, which is Carl Steinmetz, a managing director of Expats and Immigrants, writer, researcher, and MDR, therapist and psychologist who provides consultancy, coaching, trainings, and workshops for people with expats or migrant backgrounds.
Yes, and this is from a new book that's coming out, I believe. Take it away, Carl.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm very pleased that I can present a lecture about how Dutch healthcare neglects superdiversity. Thanks to Gloria and thanks to Max. My structure will be, I'll start off with neocolonialism, superdiversity and the costs of health. The second element will be holism and stress languages. And I will end with a little bit positive news, which is called super diverse guidelines. So that's the way I'm going through the material. Shall we go to the next slide? Sorry, I just forgot all those things. Because I can't see the slides very well. Okay, my speech is based on an article in this magazine, and Humanities and Social Sciences. And I also like to summarize the abstract. And the abstract says that this article is about super diverse healthcare in the Netherlands. And I quote our National Bureau of Statistics, CBS it's called, and almost a quarter of the Dutch population is coming from another country than the Netherlands. Big groups in the Netherlands are now, according to the CBS, people from Indonesia like me. I'm coming from Medan, and I'm coming from the island Sumatra. The second biggest group is the Surinamese people, Turkish, Moroccan, and Polish. These are the bigger groups nowadays, and that might change over time. CBS is really concerned about the physical and mental health of non-Western immigrants in comparison to the original Dutch ones. And in this article, I propose, let's say, a reorganization of psychological health care that does justice to the super diverse society. Super diverse might not mean that much to you, but in this city, it's almost 55% which is coming from another country. I'm using the building blocks of this proposal, which are coming from legislation, which are coming from international and national guidelines, transcultural psychiatry, and the results of scientific and practical research in healthcare. I like to say one thing which is really important to my opinion, based on the data being shown by Gloria. We know by research that the best approach of people who need care is ethnic matching. That might sound strange, but it's the best. Let's say I'm coming from Indonesia, so I should help someone who is in need of help from Indonesia. And that's the best match instead of matching with all kinds of other people. So if you got that many white people in psychology or in psychiatry, we do have a serious problem. Okay, that's my article, which I'm going to present a bit further. I also wrote, and I will use that, sorry, I don't know what happens. Max? It's gone. I'm a little bit stuck, sorry. Let's say I can keep on talking, that's better, instead of watching all those slides. I wrote a book about stress languages. And this book has two separate ways of looking at it. First of all, we do have a language, a manner in countries where you explain your stories. For instance, in Turkey, it's meda. It's a famous way of telling stories. In North Africa, it's makawati. We have similar ways. In Ghana, they use, let's say, the spider Anansi, which has also been brought to the Caribbean islands. Anyway, a part of the book is going about that, how people phrase their stories, their illness stories into these frames. Secondly, I'm trying to explain that most countries do have a separate stress language, which is not the same. We know in the West, we say, okay, you got a bit stress, or you have a trauma, or whatever. But there are different ways to explain that. For instance, in Afghanistan, they use the word Deltangi. Deltangi means that the room where you can find my heart is too small, which simply means that people are very depressed. That's all. So I like to skip now to the following picture. Oh gee, it's going really fast. Okay, I think you have to understand that superdiversity is not coming by itself. It's the effect of colonization and neo-colonization. So this picture to the right, France and Africa, where Africa is still feeding the fat man coming from France, and it's still going on. It's called neo-colonization or post-colonization. You have different words for it. And in fact, it means that we found after the period of colonization, which is the European one, and that started around the 15th century. There are many more colonizations before that. For instance, from the part of which my mother came, Persia, you have also colonization. But anyway, we face the European ones, and in the European colonization, we have destroyed many parts of the world, both in Africa and both in Asia. But after it was declared that countries or continents did become independent, let's say the second step was committing wars, like the Americans are committing every year since 1798 wars, and making people poor, and then they have to go to the World Bank and the IMF, and they are American institutes, and they have to deliver, let's say, money, and you pay for the money a high mortgage rate, and then you are again in problem. So there are new mechanisms of colonization which did take place for the old ones. So that's the meaning of superdiversity. Superdiversity shouldn't be seen as an independent fact of life. Although you can see these data, there is a professor in Amsterdam telling that we are superdiverse since the 16th century. Anyway, let's enter the issue of health cost. That's an important one. The health of people with a Dutch background is generally better than that of people with a non-Western immigration background. People with a non-Western background have higher health care costs and experience their own health less often as very good. So I can be more specific, but in general we see that people from other countries are not being treated in an appropriate way, which is understandable if the white people don't know their backgrounds. Okay, I like to proceed to the second section of my speech. I'm doing it quite fast because I got only 10 minutes, and which is strange, but anyway, that's how Max decided it. I like to introduce a major concept which is which you might call holism. It means connected to lots of things around us. But let's start with the African one, which is coming from Mogose, and that's called Ubuntu. Ubu means I am, you are, he is, we are, etc. And you know from Ubu that it's, let's say, related to time. Untu means I can't see many people here, but if I look into your face, I do know that I exist. The same is true for the Ayurveda. The Ayurveda says that the human being is a mini universum compared to the bigger ones. And you can see that clearly in something which is called dat. That's a kind of cultural concept of distress. Anyway, I can go on, but I got already a sign that I have to hurry up. I still like to introduce two famous elements of the stress language I'm using in Indonesia. One of them is Sugi Sakit. And Sugi Sakit means that you bring the people who are troubled by illness or disease and only think about their organs. You bring them in a world of fantasy. Let's summarize it like that. And by bringing them in this world, they might think that they are a part of the bigger world, and they start thinking less about their organs. That's one way of looking at it. Nijep is something which is very well documented after the genocide in 1995 and 1996 in Indonesia. And Nijep means that you are depressed, as we say it in the West, depressed and have anxiety complaints. But they enter into complete silence, and that's called Nijep. And in this silence, you'll see also little people in the sawas. They are looking black, and people are afraid of them. Anyway, this is a part of the stress languages, a little part in Indonesia. I like to end my speech with the fact that we do have super diverse mental health guidelines. I heard what Gloria said about the UK and about America, but let's define transcultural healthcare. Transcultural healthcare, I'm getting this definition from Kamaldeep Bui, who's the most famous professor in transcultural psychiatry. Transcultural healthcare, culturally aware and sensitive, means working on consciously and sensible coping with the culture of various immigrants, refugees and expat groups in mental health care with its many subcultures and layers of granularity. Culture also requires exploring power relations and is important for every person regardless of origin and ethnic, religious or cultural heritage. Cultural issues are normally given a low priority in the provision of healthcare. Okay, that's been said in general. The APA, the American Psychologists, did some good work, to my opinion, and they said in their guidelines, promote the awareness that identity and self-definition are fluid, complex and dynamic. They said also acquire knowledge about the history of power, which I think is very important if you do that. Oppression and privileges, including neocolonization, refugees and immigration history, and the residents in the new fatherland. Anyway, the only thing I like to add to this is that we got a Dutch version of it, and that's been written down by Aqua. It has unfortunately the name diverse, the guidelines about diversity. I don't like this word because it means that I also do belong to this group. But anyway, they made good guidelines and they are practical and usable. But as far as I know, they have not been implemented in, at least in mental health care. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Carl.
Thank you. Okay, Carl, I got to say something about the little figures that you said are black looking. That concerns me. That does concern me. So I hope to learn more about that, because that's something new for me. But that's what this is about, as well, being more culturally astute and aware as well. So I want to introduce our next fabulous guest, Rochelle van Manen. Ms. van Manen, can you please tell us more about your wonderful self?
Hi, I'm Rochelle. I'm from the Decolonization Network. How do you say that? Voormalig Nederlands-India?
Yeah,
because formerly Dutch Indies.
Yes.
I'm an activist and I studied psychology. That is my background, but I graduated during the 2008 crisis. Mm-hmm. So I couldn't find any work in the psychology. And nowadays I'm an activist, so they tell me.
She is.
And I'm here to talk about cultural specific care and also my experience during university.
Yeah. Yeah. So tell us first a little bit about university. I asked you, were there any philosophers or psychologists of color that you studied, particularly during your studies?
No, because when I was 18, for me, it was Jung and Freud. Mm-hmm. And I thought Jung was very interesting. Mm-hmm. With the knowledge I have now, I know it's very problematic, especially in my experience as well with a psychologist who are white. They tell me when I ask for a woman or when I ask for a person of color, they tell me that they can help me as well because psychology doesn't see any color.
Yeah, I heard that too.
So, well, that's not true.
So.
Because I had to constantly defend my experience, and so I couldn't heal. And that's problematic, I think. And that's why I think cultural specific, ethnic specific care is very important. I speak Dutch very well, but also like for people who have a language barrier, it's very difficult to express yourself in another language, especially when it comes to trauma, and especially when it comes to experiences which someone cannot understand if they're white, male, hetero.
I wanted to also ask you, because I want to be clear, when you were studying, what was it that then you thought you would get out of that for yourself?
I started studying psychology because I wanted to help people. And I wanted especially to help women with sexual trauma, because that was something that I had experienced. And when I was seeking for help, there wasn't any specific help that I could get. So it actually traumatizes you more if you have a male white or someone who looks like the perpetrator.
The perpetrator, thank you. And why does it get to that?
So that's it will slap you more, and it will make you more seeking to find some peace and some peace of mind. So that was my motivation when I started studying psychology, because I think. Well, I thought then that it would be very nice if there were more people like me who could help other people. Yeah. And then the recession came, so I couldn't help.
And she's referring to 2008. There was a huge recession. It also hit the States as well. Yeah. So that affected a lot of things. And do you, with the recession, I also want to ask you: do you think the issue of race would have been an issue of being a woman? Would have also been a factor at that time?
I think so, because when I was in university, I think my experience was I wasn't taken seriously as my white classmates, and especially, psychology is what I saw during my study. It was a lot of women, white women, who study psychology, and their experience is different than my experience. So, and what I saw is that when they made like assignments, that it would be great, and when I was looking at it, I was like, that's not inventive at all. And what I was doing, and everybody was like, no, what you're doing is it's not about psychology. And I'm like, well, it is about psychology because race is about psychology too.
Yeah, certainly.
Yeah.
It certainly is.
Yeah.
And what do you think now? I mean, you're very engaged actively, also in the education aspect. You're also a parent as well. So how, for you, is important, not only are your studies, but how you can, how do you apply them now? Because, I mean, that is something, you're still working with people.
Yeah.
So I'm sure those skills are still there.
Yeah. What I do, and I really hate that about myself, to be honest, is I don't police myself because so I when I speak to especially white people, it's like, okay, so I'm talking to this person, so I have to mind my tone, I have to mind my body language, because I know that psychologically, it's very. What people perceive is how they treat you, and so if I talk to school teachers, I speak softer, and I speak like my voice goes higher, and that is all things due to trauma and due to what I learned at school, how body language is. I have an open body language, or I have a closed one, or how people perceive me.
So are you more self-conscious, do you think, because of race?
Yes. Yes. And also with the psychological background, I'm constantly in my head thinking about how people perceive me. And that's very...
it's tiring.
Yeah, I'm tired all the time.
Yeah. I was going to say, it's really tiring because as a teacher, I've worked in private school, public schools, in galleries, I've done art programs, and each time I am spending quite a bit of time policing myself because I already can anticipate someone's response. I'm a black, tall woman, and that generally is not received favorably.
And we're not
often.
Soft-spoken.
No, we're not soft-spoken at all. So so these issues of body language, and also what I was asking you about your experience in school where you didn't, so there was no person of color.
No, there was no person of color who taught me, and mostly were male in the 50s. Like, there wasn't any diversity at all. And I know there was a girl at my school, and she wore a hijab. She was in my class, and she was like, the first day she was sent to the cleaners, like, oh, your class is over there. And that's how you start your school.
Damn.
That's awful. And she dropped out there for 6 months, and I understand why, because she couldn't get through the system.
No.
And that's a horrible thing. Like, we lose a lot of really great people because we do not fit in the psychological system as it is.
Even not even just to study.
Even
just
not
to be
even just
students.
that's exactly.
So that's quite horrible.
Yeah.
In fact, what do you think? As I'm looking at our time here, what is it that you think can be better done?
I think we have to broaden the spectrum, and we have to say, like, psychology is not about white, cis, male, heteros only. It's about, like, so much broader. So we have to we have to, like, throw out the system and then have a new one, because this is not it. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rochelle. Thank you, Rochelle, for sharing your experience with the study, with the interview of Gloria. Gloria, it says a lot that you can't find yourself back in your studies, and that you cannot find the knowledge to help maybe the people from your background through your studies.
Yeah.
And I think also it relates to Carl's presentation, that you have many different stress languages or ways to express, and then you're not equipped
limited
with the knowledge.
Yeah, you're limited even in the educational aspect. I mean, I think that I was really moved by what Rochelle said about basically you're made to feel like if you don't kind of go along with it and you introduce something that is not part of the curriculum that they expect, that you're immediately sort of separated as well. I mean, that you're othered as well. So I think that's how can the people who are teaching psychology not recognize that about themselves? I think that's
something to save for later to go on more. But we have another guest as well, which is Abbaass-Saal.
Hey, Amal.
If I'm not saying it correctly, please correct me, Amal. But she will also be telling her experiences, and she's also taking initiatives herself to help people with migrant backgrounds and children, especially in alternative and different ways. But yeah, so thank you for being here, Amal. Can you maybe share something with us of what has been your experience first, before you tell about your own initiative? Also, what has been your experience so far with Dutch mental health care, to the extent that it's suitable for people with different backgrounds?
My experience about Dutch mental health care relates specifically to the city of Almere and also many cities and villages throughout the Netherlands. I cannot speak about bigger cities such as Amsterdam and Rotterdam, which may have improved what is in the rest of the country, in my humble professional opinion, a disastrous and dysfunctional state of affairs. First of all, Black, Indigenous, and people of color are faced with what is called a racial empathy gap, where people feel more empathy towards whites than towards Blacks, particularly when related to medical treatment or pain. I remember Glenn Halberg telling me that during his study of psychiatry, he was actually taught from the stereotypical racist assumption that Black people feel less emotional pain than people. This is what the psychiatrists are taught that we seek to get help from. Not surprising, it is now a well-researched fact that white medical practitioners do not feel the same level of empathy for Black people experiencing physical and mental health pain than they do for people of their own kind. This often unconscious or taught bias towards patients leads not only in the Dutch mental health care to improper care and sometimes means that no treatment is offered. At the beginning of the year, I asked my local GP, general practitioner, for a referral letter, which took her staff about 6 months to write. And when the designated lady eventually did what I asked, I was shocked to read that she wrongfully stereotyped me to be a refugee, probably political, working for asylum seekers. As opposed to describing me as the chair of the board of a local NGO, a woman of African, Sudanese, and European roots, a German national since birth. The access to transcultural systemic mental health services is severely impaired since mainstream doctors, schools, and hospitals do not even know about the need and existence of culturally sensitive mental health services. So they also don't refer their clients to these services. General practitioners, hospitals and schools and neighborhood teams are the main referral agents in the Netherlands. And these are very often not aware of the long-term impact of daily racism, language and cultural barriers, side effects of white supremacy, what it means to be uprooted, the ongoing impact of colonialism, slavery, or various massacres and traumas that still affect our families and communities. There's often no ability to change perspectives, no understanding of transcultural and personal therapies, and why it may be essential to Black, Indigenous, and people of color in order to heal, to access these alternatives. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you fine.
Can hear you loud.
Thank you.
And clear.
The Dutch mental health system is not only problematic for those suffering chronic symptoms. Children and young people from refugee and migrant communities are being targeted, maybe because statementing brings extra money to schools, or simply because some of the professionals think they know best. Let me give you an example. A little boy. He's noted as hyperactive in the eyes of his culturally unaware teacher. She refers him to a typical GZ-psycholoog, a psychologist within mainstream mental health services. After one observation and one conversation with his mother, he receives a diagnosis. His mother does not agree and asked me to attend the meeting with the psychologist. I asked the lady about her assessment of the family situation, and it becomes clear that she did not know that the little boy's father almost died due to heart disease, and the little boy witnessed that. Little boy had recently traveled with his father to his home country, where his father had to say their last goodbyes. Upon return to the Netherlands, the family with 8 children were refused social security payments, which caused tremendous anxiety and countless practical problems. I could go on. The mental health practitioners had failed to earn the trust of the family, and so her conclusion of the observed behavior of this little boy were completely false. Fortunately, we were able to guide the family to a culturally sensitive mental health service, where 2 assessments with 5 in-school observations concluded that there was nothing wrong with this little boy and that he was merely sensitively responding to the extreme environment he was faced with. How many children are similarly misdiagnosed, negatively affecting the expectations of their school and career development? How much potential gets lost in this way? How many mothers learned to stand up for their children and their rights? And did you know that the intelligence test used on our children and during solicitation procedures for adults are all culturally biased, contributing to a long-term inequality in the Dutch job market and the increased risk of burnout amongst Black, Indigenous, and people of color working extra hard to compensate?
Thank you, Amal, for your story. And I think this is also something we will talk about later, because we also have a psychologist who is working with children specifically. Yes. So we can also ask him if he recognizes some of your stories of quick diagnosis. Before we go to the next part, I'm also curious, because you are working with children. What is it you do? And you try, as a last question, what is it you do and work with children with migrant backgrounds? How do you do it differently?
I'm a founder of a local charity, Inspiratie Inc., providing community mental health service to people of all ages, people who are in vulnerable positions. A majority are people from refugee and migrant communities. The pictures you see are from our center, Aquaba, which means you're welcome. A lot of the people attending our center suffering with symptoms of post-traumatic stress. Knowing that 80% of people that have spent more than 3 years in a refugee camp is at risk to develop long-term problems, we also offer preventative strategies that combat social exclusion by welcoming people of all ages with familiar sounds and smells and tastes of homes. We celebrate Bring a Dish parties where we joyously meet each other's culture, religious and spiritual festivals. We engage in community art, daily hands-on activities centered around the 5 elements: water, earth, mineral, fire, and nature. We help one another, and in so doing, we also cook fresh meals for homeless community members on a daily basis. I'm a qualified sun play therapist. You can see on one of those slides all the different toys of the treatment room. It's a great nonverbal play therapy technique. Just like the work of the French-Mexican professor Marie-Rosé Moreau, and in the Netherlands, popular and beautiful practice of beschermjassen, which means protective wrapping, developed by the transcultural systemic family therapist Kitlin Tinaji and Irene Swan. These effective interventions do not fit into the databases, cost per item healthcare product codes used by Dutch governmental authorities. By working as a trainer, I'm proactive in helping to effect this change. However, as an organization, we are severely affected by institutional racism, as our different approach is misunderstood, eyed with suspicion, and openly discriminated to the point that indications that are typically given within 1 or 2 weeks may take 6 months or a period of 2 years and have now stopped altogether. Our organization name was omitted in the list of recognized healthcare providers despite our contracts with the local authority. We're accused of providing services which attract refugees to our city, and that makes us a target for right-wing populism, justifying constant vicious attacks. Sadly, being forced to defend our good name and honorable intentions has become the norm, without any compensation or support given, despite the recognition that we succeeded in developing the city's largest active network of people with refugee and migrant backgrounds. In 2016, an alderman of our city promised us an independent research into access barriers that should be conducted. And it is 2020, and the promise remains unfulfilled. Racism, whether intentional or implicit, hurts public health and psychologically harms our children. I believe everyone needs to prioritize addressing structural disadvantage, socioeconomic deprivation, and institutionalized racism. Black, Indigenous, and people of color, and the various independent organizations that we set up should not have to carry the burden of coping with the impact of these and other forms of inequalities alone. Let us therefore work together.
To stop, to go to the next speaker, but I really I hear the struggles that you're having, and I'm so glad that you're doing the work, but I'm hoping that you will get the support that you need, and please keep us abreast of how it actually is going. And thank you so much, Sheila. And next is, I'm sorry I said Sheila, but that's coming after.
It's gonna be Amal.
After. So thank you, Amal. And now we're going to go to, I hope.
Poetry.
Poetry, yes. And we have a wonderful poet here. I'm going to give him a quick, wonderful introduction. Abdo, that's introduction enough. Let us hear it.
Yes, let's let the poetry speak.
All right. I'm here to perform a poem for the sanity of poets of color. Definition: mental health for poets. Noun: not a luxury. A side order to a main course of institutional racism also reads as a gentle rebellion, a raging introspection, and a soul-sucking call to the ancestors. Prelude. Poetry is a quiz, a gentle whisper which violently questions who you are and why you're writing. I want to set my words free, but often they look back, stall, and ask for a purpose. More often, the writing forgets to ask, for who? When it remembers, I find myself racing to answer, for me. I write so that for once my worlds can combine, even if on paper. I follow Quilomba's footsteps and say that I write because I have to. I follow Orwell's when I say I write because I'm scared. I follow Audre Lorde in that for me, writing is no longer a luxury. Yet a poem is often an incomplete song, a broken record. The walls my world builds become unbearable at days, uncrossable. When words are consumed in building barriers, they lose their ability to negotiate. In the transition from thoughts to words, I face a unique anxiety, a border crossing. It is perhaps the same anxiety Narcissus once faced. What if my writing exposes me for who I'm not, or even worse, for who I am? Writing is a revelation. Although it cannot be measured, it guides. The spikes of spiritual guidance and expression are also not a luxury. When they stop, they destroy and disturb. A rider may only lose his horse, but his horse can end up running rampant, building walls, drowning in false reflections, and flirting with existential dread. Tick, tock. Tick, tock. Tick, tock. The snakes say awake. It's 7 a.m. and I wake up pretty and amused, to be honest. Pretty, confused, swollen arms, stunned face, broken dreams, and a little shrine beyond me is beyond bruised. I'm a morning person, this should be easy. It was not a violent rhythm ticking unnoticed, but it's not that of the clock. Tick, tock, tick, tock. 7:30, and I remember how a real man never bleeds, just delicately covers their wounds with the seed of their work, day in, day out, clock in, clock out. A day's work means nothing if not placed within a lifetime of labor. Tick, tock. Tick-tock. It's 8 a.m. and my dreams start to fade to a perfectly crafted song. The background of a dystopic film where emotions are turned into muscle, vulnerability disallowed, and every man sits arrogantly on top of his porcelain throne as his delusions are reaffirmed by other men on bigger thrones. Tick-tock. Tick-tock. It's 8:30 and I'm expected to raise my own by 9, pass the torch to a mini-me, play keep-ups to the historically transcendent and collective crime. Tick-tock. Tick-tock. I just missed a call to a prayer I was destined to lead. I skipped a line in a village of mouths I'm destined to feed. I played an emotional hitman. I've done the deed. Tick. Tick. Tick, tick, tick. I now dream of a broken clock. I now dream of a talk that would never come. I now dream of a world where men dare to daydream, where similar birds don't flock and my analogies aren't as apparent as they now seem. Tick, tick, tick. Thank you.
Thank you.
Abdul Rahman Hassan, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Max?
Yes,
a
thank you.
pleasure.
So our next guest, who is a psychiatrist for both youth, children, and adults, is now sitting with us, which is Dr. Zeynal Erkut. And welcome to the table. And I mean, you've been listening so far to the stories as well. And I was curious when listening to Amal's story as well, where you seen one of the psychiatrists put a label quickly on a child while not taking into account the whole situation. Can you tell us maybe what do you see as a psychiatrist, what the impact is of racism, and is it true that sometimes psychology or psychiatry doesn't recognize this?
The differences, the day-to-day racism,
and how it
cultural
affects
differences.
people's lives.
Yes.
Yeah. Let me see. I guess I will choose to use the word discrimination today instead of racism. I think it is general and wider. And I will tell something about the impact of discrimination on the mental health of individuals. But as well, I would like to share some experiences of me about how we are trying to give mental health services to different groups in Amsterdam and in the region of Amsterdam. So experience of the last 15 years and which is working good and what doesn't work good. I'm not the expert to tell a lot about the impact of discrimination on the mental health, because it has been studied very largely. It has been published. It has been
In the Netherlands.
all over the world. In the Netherlands, much less.
That's my
And
question.
why do you think it's less studied here?
It's a good question. It is. I guess it is difficult here to study such thing because, like in the States, you have big groups that you can study, and you can put big groups under 2 or 3 or 4 classifications. In the Netherlands, like in Amsterdam, there are registered 120 nationalities living, and then when you're registering a nationality living in Amsterdam, it has to count more than some
A certain percentage.
some percentage. So everybody is living in Amsterdam, for example. In Amsterdam is enormous diverse. So it's very difficult to make such a study, the first instance. But we can make studies.
But it can be made.
It can be made
Thank you.
on not on terms of racism, but it can be made on terms of discrimination, exclusion. And I think it will be done because it must be done. In Amsterdam, we know that like more than half of the population is not Dutch living here. And yet everything about the healthcare system is determined by the Dutch authorities and the Dutch way of thinking and Dutch rules and everything. I don't think it is black and white. It is totally wrong. I don't say something like that. But we miss. Now I'm not talking about the individual. We miss at the executive level, at the higher level, the diversity. And as long as we don't have at the higher level the diversity to represent all these people living in this region, you cannot touch the right place of the problem.
And what do you think, as let's say we would have the diversity, what kind of decisions should be made? Because one thing is, you said there's not enough knowledge being produced. What are other things, maybe particular skills that you have attained over time that you think this is something that more psychiatrists should have relating to this diversity that is now here?
In the education of the doctors to psychiatrists, in Holland, actually there are pretty much progression to attend the assistance of psychiatry to transcultural psychiatry lessons. And
Did you have transcultural lessons as a student yourself?
yes.
And what years would that have been? Sorry.
It is like at least giving the idea that there are other cultures, and when you approach the other cultures, you must be careful. It is an entrance to the concept of what is a culture, what is another culture.
Right.
You must, like for psychiatry, just like psychology, it is 4 years of education. And in the 4 years of education, you only have maybe half a year lessons about it. It must be much more of that. It must be also exciting.
So can you tell me what years you were studying that you said you did receive transcultural studies within your pursuit, your studies towards psychiatry? Or what years? Because was it the 80s here? Was that the 70s here?
No. It is it has been like 15 years.
Yeah.
10 to 15 years. It hasn't been changed a lot now since then. But when I compare it to what my colleagues had received, like in such like Denmark or Finland, it is better here than there.
Okay.
But yet we have much more diverse population here than there, so we need much more than this. I am also from another ethnical background who came to Holland. And so I'm more sensitive in the cultural way of thinking and seeing. So I had the advantage of getting all these knowledge and feelings and applying to my own practice.
And do you agree then with the statement that Carl said, that from your background, he said somewhere in the presentation, it would be helpful if an Indonesian can go to an Indonesian psychiatrist. Can you tell something, maybe what's your background and how maybe that helps if you have someone from a similar background?
All right.
Yeah.
So I was not planning to tell this here. But,
I can tell that you weren't planning to answer that.
But
sorry
now,
about that.
But I'm going to tell it. So I'm a founder of a small institution of psychiatry, psychology and psychiatry in Amsterdam and in the region, and all the people working in this practice are from Turkish origin. So everybody speaks Turkish. So some of them are grown here in Holland, and some of them are from Turkey. And it is a kind of experiment. It's a kind of experiment of mine that to gather all those people, educated psychologists, and sometimes experience of 10 years or 15 years, together to see if we can help the target population better than the mainstream psychiatry.
Do you have a target population? A Turkish?
It is automatically transcultural. Yeah. It is automatically like that, and then our attendees are most of the Turkish people finding us. Yeah. So we don't go out and say, we are all Turkish-speaking people. Just we never do it, because we also have Dutch and from other cultures, the patients.
I can imagine the language will already be helpful, that you speak the same language so you can express yourself.
It is the language and it's the culture.
Yeah.
And I cannot say which one is more important, because sometimes it is really the language, because some Turkish people living here already 40 years, they speak still only Turkish but nothing else. So for them it's Turkish, their main reason. But for some other people, the third generation, who doesn't speak Turkish that much, still chooses us because of the
Cultural
culture.
connect, yes.
Because they don't need the Turkish language anymore. They prefer to speak Dutch with our Turkish-Dutch colleagues, but it's all about the culture. So it is the combination of all these components that you can feel and you can help someone in a better way, more efficient. It is honest, I must say, and it is without the prejudice. So they don't feel excluded, and we are trying to not exclude it. But I don't say that we are doing everything much better than other colleagues in Holland. But we are trying
No,
another
it's
setup.
not about better, but it's sometimes recognizing that being
it's
there from the
happening.
same
Exactly.
background is
Yeah.
gonna be better.
Exactly.
It's not an hierarchy. It's just
Yeah.
being able to help
And it's
people out
another
better
option
in that sense.
also.
Yeah.
It is
really
another
an
option.
But we
And
have to,
I
in
must
terms
say
of
that
time, we do have to move on. But you
Yes.
can finish your last.
some of those people have seen already many other therapists in Holland, and they come at the end to us, and then they can compare. We don't need to compare, but they can compare. And I guess there is much to do in this cultural help to the target population if we are given the chance to do it. But I must say, at the executive level, like the system, the Dutch health system, they don't see it like that. We don't get enough budget to explore and to innovate new models, and then to get more personnel to help more people. So
Yes.
it is fighting
It is
against the
indeed
wind. Yes,
more recognition, basically, that it's
And funding.
impactful.
And
yeah,
funding,
funding.
that's what I'm
Yes,
hearing,
yes,
yeah.
because there is a lot to do about this.
And I do
Right.
know that there are other organizations that are white and led, like those who did the Depressi Gala, which I'm sorry to even mention, which was a lot of money spent. I know you never heard of it. It was something they did on TV, and a lot of organizations that are white led received money, and it was pretty much called the Depressi Gala. And you can make that face, because I did when I saw it. So that was very well funded, and so I really appreciate what you're saying when you can't receive funding for alternative ways of assisting people with mental health issues, and I hope that changes as well. And thank you so much, Zainal,
You're welcome.
for your work
You're
as well.
welcome.
All right, thank you
You're
so
welcome.
much.
Thank you, Zainal.
Okay, thank you.
All right, we're gonna go to the next guest. Thank you, Zainal.
All right, go ahead, Zainal. You know we're gonna get the next person up in here.
So
Thank you, thank you.
I think it's gonna be you introducing.
Yeah, I think it
Sheila,
is.
right?
So I think it's Shyla. Shyla? Yeah, I had you come up to you earlier before. Sorry. I had you come up to you earlier before, so my bad as well. But I want to introduce Shyla Jitani, and she is a shiatsu registered, I should say. How do I say that? Registered shiatsu therapist.
Yeah.
Was that good? That
Yeah.
was good. So tell us about what shiatsu is, about yourself and your background also.
Yeah, shiatsu, and I'm specifically trained for Zen shiatsu. That's a different style.
Yes.
And Zen shiatsu is a form of body work that uses finger compression and gentle stretching to open up the energetic system of the body to promote a healthy feeling. And it was developed by, Zen shiatsu was developed by Shizuto Masunaga.
Masunaga?
Yeah. And it's based on traditional Chinese medicine and meridian theory. And meridians are around muscles. They are channels around muscles, and through the meridians, qi, or in Chinese, or qi flows.
Is that breath?
No,
or
it's
energy?
life
Thank
energy.
you.
Yeah, yeah. And qi is everywhere.
Everywhere.
Yeah. So I studied that in Amsterdam, and I graduated in 2018, and I researched embodied racism from a shiatsu perspective. And when I wrote my thesis is a big word for what I wrote, but when I handed in my first version, my teacher said to me that the introduction was super angry and that I should tone it down. But I was merely stating the facts. It was just like articles I read and like summaries from the articles, experience, like lived experience for me. Yeah. So Yeah.
I'm just
It's-
curious because you said embodied racism. And now you said
yeah.
the response, but what is it exactly? Or how
Embodied
did you define it?
racism. Yeah. So I was curious what the effects are from daily race, like suffering daily racism, microaggressions. What the effects are on your body. And it's really, I find it interesting because when I think about my own experiences, because there were several, of course.
Yeah, of course, unfortunately.
I noticed that like my heart starts to beat like heavy in my chest, or I feel like making myself smaller. Like there are really somatic.
So there's like a visceral
effect-
feeling from racism
Yeah,
and
from
yes,
exclusion and-
discrimination. Going back to what I know, that feeling, the feeling of it. Yes,
But
yes.
if you imagine, like, I think everyone knows that when you enter a white space, that you have like somatic
We're
reaction.
talking about correcting yourself and being
Yes.
aware of your tone and
Yeah.
your body movements.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, that's
I
stressful.
think that's very interesting what you say also with the embodied racism, that usually I think in the West kind of the body is separated from the mind. And I guess you look at the connection of the
Exactly.
two. Do
Yeah,
you think
'cause
this is
Carl,
recognized enough?
yes.
Or how it helps if you work with the body to help the mind? Can you
Yes,
tell
I think
something about
so.
this?
Carl ended, I think, with holism. And I think it's a really effective way of maintaining your health, to not separate your mind from your body. In the Eastern philosophy, it's one. And as I said before, ki is something that's it's all around us. And if your ki is out of balance, it can translate to skin problems or depressed feelings,
Sleeping problems and disruption of your daily self.
Exactly.
Yes, yes.
So shiatsu is a very effective way of approaching your health, and maybe look into your eczema or something. There's like always, I think, something behind it. It isn't just an effect of the wrong skincare routine or...
So it really does, shiatsu does really provide another way of looking at it. The beginning, I showed ways in which psychologists might look at you and methods that they might employ, and shiatsu was not there, basically. So can you tell me, what do you think about shiatsu as far as something that should it be available? Is it important also yourself as a woman of color? Are you in a field where you see other people like you? So...
Yeah, I think it's important to implement it in the regular healthcare, but it's it's mostly perceived as quackery in the West, and I think that's a bit of an uninformed opinion.
I'll say in New York and California, it's very popular.
Yeah?
Yes, it is for over 20 years. I know people who are practitioners, but also seeking those services.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's lessened now, but it's been popular at least for 20 years, as far as I've been aware.
Here I think it's still
quackery.
Well,
sorry.
Yeah,
it sucks.
How many places are there in Amsterdam? Is it easy to get? Would it be expensive if someone, because maybe does insurance cover this, for instance, or is this not recognized enough?
Aanvullende verzekering, and if you have like the proper papers, and if you are with an association, then a part of your treatment gets reimbursed. But
So
you were
asking. I was asking also about your own, in your field, are you seeing people who look like you? And also want to go back again a little bit to ask you to finish more about the question of cost of it. How does that balance out for you as the practitioner and also for your patients?
Yeah. I don't think there's a lot of people of color practicing alternative medicine or shiatsu therapy in my case. So that was always an issue when I studied it. And also now I feel not so comfortable to go to a white shiatsu therapist, although they are my coworkers or my colleagues.
So awkward.
You know?
Awkward.
Yeah, but
no, I know.
I thought it was a super heavy spring last spring with the the uprisings and the start of the growth of Black Lives Matter in the Netherlands. And I noticed that I really needed shiatsu, but I didn't went through with seeking or go to my coworker because it was too complex for me to tell them what I was going through.
So you can't even work with your coworkers in a certain...
No, because I'm always like the angry Black person, always in my...
I thought it was just me. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
But,
That sucks. We've got 29, just a few seconds. I know. I know, that was great, right? I know. But it was great what you were informing us of and giving us a view also of your experiences. So can you tell me in the last few seconds, what do you want to get better regarding the services you provide?
What do I want? I want to be available for the Black Indigenous people of color in the Netherlands, as far as there are Indigenous people in the Netherlands. And also, honestly, I want to be available for everyone. Non-cis, white, male.
Exactly.
Because they have everything already. So that's what I want. And I think it's necessary that shiatsu gets or at least bodywork gets a more prominent place in medicine, because you process so much through so much healing through body work.
Definitely.
And sometimes it's difficult to find words to that reflect your inner world accurately. I could go on forever, but I feel the time
I think it's a nice bridge also to the next part, actually.
Yeah.
Okay.
So first, thank you so much, Shayla. Thank you.
Yes.
Good luck with the rest of your work as well. It's everything is much needed now as ever.
Yeah.
So thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
So you're going to make the announcement, but while you're doing that, I would like, before that, part of this is also to give people as well an understanding of what are the resources as well. We're going to also ask Glenn about that when he comes up next. We're so excited about that. But first, I want to also just say there's the Caribbean Alliance of Psychology, CANPA, and that's the part of the Suriname Society of Psychologists. There's also the trans and gay and cross-cultural therapy. That's also a group in America. There's also the Black, African, and Caribbean group of psychologists, and that's out of the UK. And so we'll hopefully put this information on our site afterwards. We'll add it to the site as well afterwards. But just so you know, there are certainly new and upcoming programs, particularly in the last 10 years and recently, that are helping to address exactly the issues that we're discussing. Max?
Thank you, Gloria. So next we'll be talking with Glenn Helberg. He's known also from working with social movement, with the Black Lives Matter movement, but also as a psychiatrist, and he's a chairperson also of Rethink. But before we will talk to him, we will first look at a video and I was
clip.
talking about the bridge, and you'll see the bridge in the video as well. So let's look at the video first.
Ik ga de klankschaal gebruiken. Als ik merk dat iemand niet tot rust kan komen, bijvoorbeeld, kan het een van de technieken zijn die ik toepas. En adem rustig in en uit. En je voelt je voeten, je hele lichaam. Oké, daar gaan we.
Zijn er. Hallo.
Hallo, inderdaad. Wat komt er nu op dit moment in jou?
Ik ben best wel rustig. Ik zat te denken dat ik zo'n ding wilde hebben voor mezelf.
Zo'n klankschaal?
Ja, ik denk dat het goed werkt om even alles weer te vergeten. En ik denk zelfs dat het in de muziek ook goed zou werken als je op de helft van een album even zo'n ding hoort en dan totaal nieuwe muziek presenteert. Dus, ja.
Ben ik benieuwd naar je volgende album?
Ja.
So we just saw a video of Regment, and I think this is a good bridge because, Sheila just talked about how the body is connected to the mind, and in this video, I don't believe in coincidence. You use a scale to put somebody back in the body. Can you explain, why you do this and when you started to decide to involve the body as well, or to look at it more holistically?
I loved Sheila when she was talking about integrating the body and the mind.
Yes.
And your question is, when did I start?
Yeah, because you've been trained, I guess, also in the Western way as a psychiatrist to
Yes,
get
I
the
was.
diploma. And when did you decide to mix other way? I mean, this skill, I don't know if it's not a Western practice per se.
Yes, it's not Western.
Yeah. So when did you decide to mix these
to bring other cultural influences to your work,
to your practices?
First, I say the truth is the truth comes from the north, the east, the south, and the west, and from above and beneath. So if we practice psychiatry or medicine and we think that the truth comes out of Western society or the Western hemisphere, then we're making this huge mistake. Because everywhere people are able to find out, how do I adapt to the situation where I am? And adapting means you're learning new things. So if somebody in the north, if he or she, if they find out something, what's the other word, not find out?
discover.
If they discover, then of course it will be different than one of the south or the east. So why not combine and then we come to the whole truth? But if you are in a certain space and you say this is the truth, then you're blind, then you can't see. And we need the way of seeing, we need different ways of seeing to combine it. And what did I do while studying? First, if you ask me what is your education, I start with my background. I start what my parents were telling me. And there was this huge thing that was conflicting. And it is indeed, I got this Western education. But at the same time, in our culture, the African education was also there. So talking about the forefathers, talking about the spirits who are there. Talking about the spirits who are there. You know, that was wonderful, but at the same time, it was not allowed. But I saw everything, and for me, it was not about... That was also part of the truth, because in my upbringing, I saw these things, and in Western society, people would say that is nonsense. So for me, there already, I had to integrate different ways of thinking, because how can you say that's nonsense, and at the same time, I see that things work? So I think my whole life, I was trying to integrate what I see and try to integrate what I knew and what I learned. And of course, there were also these things like integrating, like growing up and looking at television and all you see that's beautiful, that's white. And then the people you love were beautiful. Everything meant integrating, because I was learned a mono perspective. And so as a child, I need it because I was able to see. And then as a child already, I saw that there is a lot of reclame. How do you say that? Reclame?
Commercials.
You know, the world of commercials, that's the way white supremacy works. White supremacy works telling you this is the most this and the most that and the greatest. And for instance, when I started traveling and I went to Brazil and I saw the Iguazu waterfalls, I said, this is greater than Niagara. But growing up, it meant only the Niagara was the greatest. So I knew that telling the people what is the greatest or the best, that's, just give them to see and let them believe that's the truth. So for me, I saw a lot of truths. And in my studies, of course, it was very strange. Because of my studies, my teachers, one particular in the beginning, didn't understand why my therapies were working. Because my body language, my customs were laughing. And, you could be
so
at
you
that corner.
experience barriers when bringing in another world that you tried to do so.
I was trying by getting into the space, you bring in the other world. People don't understand. And they try to tell you the world you're bringing in is not the okay world. Right. So what are we supposed to do? As we heard, we have to tone our voice and all those things. But, I didn't need drugs to be happy. So I was happy all the time. But then they expected me to be this serious,
Somber,
psychiatrist, like that. So for me, it was always integrating, and in my work, of course, because in the beginning, who were my teachers? Nobody was my teacher. But the people who were my teachers, I already told you, were the people that were in my minds. And in the end of becoming a doctor, I became the doctor, and the first job I had, and the second job I had as not a psychiatrist yet, but that was a Surinamese doctor, and I've learned so much of that man. I'm so happy. I'm still, to this day,
what would be one lesson that you would say, like, okay, this was like an eye-opener that
he told me,
brought
one of the things, these were he had a lot of books, everywhere there were books. And I thought he knows everything. So I went to him and I said, his name was Percy Werners. And I asked him, Percy, I have this patient. What am I supposed to do with this patient? And then he said to me, I don't know why God made this person like this. I said, Percy, you have to know. You know all those books. And then he told me, er zijn maar weinig mensen die weten hoeveel ze moeten weten om te weten hoe weinig ze weten. Do you understand
a man who knows a lot
then,
knows how much he also doesn't know, or a person, I will say. Yeah.
So he taught me that how many books you've read. If you meet somebody, go and sit there and listen to that person.
So we don't go for quick labels like we heard in the story.
We don't go for quick labels,
and
we go into that place.
I wanna give space to the audience as well, because I missed one question to Zeno.
Okay.
So we're gonna not miss this one out.
No,
this one is of Romy. And Romy asked a question to you, Glenn. Do you think white people or institutes can perform healing with ancestral or traditional non-Western methods?
Good question.
Yeah, so that's the question.
If I understood the question right, white people have ancestors. So it means that white people can do that. But one of the things they are doing, they dehumanized black people, and at the same time, they dehumanized themselves. So if it's about healing, white people are not different than black people or Chinese people or whatever. But when you start, as you said, when you start putting the mind there to rationalize, and you forget about the body, you forget about emotions, then you talk about that's nonsense. But I've experienced as a black psychiatrist that even white people, when they met me, then when they saw there was a possibility to talk about the spirits or talk about the ancestors. So if white people go really back into their white people, in their history, then they will know that the truth is also there. But my experience now is this. If we look at racism, my colleague said something about we're going to talk about discrimination. I'd rather talk about racism because we swim in racism. Racism is everywhere. Racism is in my clothes. Racism is my thinking. And one of the things that Rochelle started to say about the psychology of racism. And it's not possible to transcenderen.
To transcend.
Yes, for ages, for ages, centuries, we see that racism perpetuates. So that means, what is the vehicle of racism being perpetuated? And that's the mind. That's psychology. Psychology is doing that. So if we see that in the 1800s, people were denying racism, and still they're denying, while between 1800 and now, we see what racism is, and you can still deny, that means that's something psychological. And we call those things defense mechanisms. The white psychology, all those white names that you started with, they said this is psychology. Well, if they know their psychology, then they will see that all the defense mechanisms that they used, that they learned to see, you can use them all. If we talk about racism, one of the things nowadays, when people say, "Oh, does that still happen? Oh, I don't believe that happened," then I say, just look at a defense mechanism which works. Denial is one of the biggest ones. But projective identification is one. What is that? You have these bad feelings, but then you put it on the other because your idea of yourself, you're a good person. So you cannot imagine that you're so aggressive. So what do? You project on the other feelings that you think you don't have. So the black body is aggressive, not somebody else. We are doing good. And you see that all the time. For instance, there's another defense mechanism, which we call splitting. We all know that if this Durandi, one of those sporters, those sportsmen, if they win,
Durandi, yes,
if they win,
the runner.
If they win, we all hear, the Dutch runner, if he makes a mistake, the Antillian runner.
Yeah, that's the same.
But what is that?
Yes.
That's psychological.
Yeah.
That's psychological. We call that splitting.
Yeah.
So everything we do, we can see that in racism, if we start studying racism from another perspective, seeing what is the vehicle to put in people's mind every time, that's the way we're going to do it.
Something very interesting you've introduced here, basically the psychology of reproducing racism. I think it's very interesting to put, because a lot of time psychology has been used to describe or to make primitive.
Well, also what
other
Michelle was saying, to
people's-
deny that actually exists, that there is a psychology of racism.
Behind racism.
And also that psychiatrists who are white are also, unfortunately, many of them, I should say, fall into the issue of not recognizing their own issue with recognizing their own racism in their practices and their preferences also of those practices as well. We're running out of time, but Glenn, I want to ask you, you just did something really fantastic. More fantastic things that you're doing. Can I get this another slide? The last slide. I hope, is somebody there? Am I talking into the air? Yes, there it is, Glenn. Can you tell us what that is, please?
Well, that's not my initiative, but I love this because this is one of the initiatives.
It's an initiative, and it's called basically, as in America, we say buy Black. In America, this is an initiative now in the Netherlands, and as part of that, Glenn has a... Glenn?
Well, let's say, by saying that, I heard that Sheila said she wants a lot of people to come.
Give us some of your clients then, okay? If you have an overflow, all right.
Because really, it's incredible. Because we have this, we work.
And what is it? What is it?
Okay. Like Amal was saying, we have to look at the person, his context in the family. And one of our initiatives is Expertisecentrum Transculturele Therapie, in which we work like that. We want,
there it is. Thank you for that last slide. And also, I want to say, because our time is running out, what Glenn is part of is they've started also, the slide prior to this was showing you that now you can find psychiatrists of color in the Netherlands as well. And if you go there, and we'll put this on the Parkhouse and Zwijger site later on, but this is fantastic as well, because now there is access. There are ways in which to find out where are psychologists of color in your Dutch community, where you may be, and this is throughout the Netherlands. Am I right?
Yes.
So Glenn, I want you to take the last part of this, and please tell us what you think we all can do to help make some changes and make things better.
To start with, it has to be on different levels. As we know, Kick Out Zwarte Piet and Nederland wordt beter, the group that is who were
under pressure and
but also, the people of the initiative of Black Lives Matter. Mm-hmm. At this moment, they are sitting at a table with the Prime Minister.
Trying to.
And I really think that's a good initiative, because on different levels, the Prime Minister asked them to
finally.
Really, it's great. I really appreciate what these activists are doing.
The activists are fantastic.
Yes,
and we all must
at that level,
them.
at this moment, the talks are started. But in our institutions, last Wednesday, there was this Nederlandstalige Instituut voor Psychotrauma, NTVP, and they organized the first topic in a webinar about racism because of Black Lives Matter. I was so proud of them. I told them, this is really great that you, girls, guys, everyone that you're doing this because it's needed. Because all the institutions, they deny. So they are all psychologists. But I have to tell you this. In the beginning, in 1990, in 1990, we already started doing this. And I thought we organized this WHO Congress. And we thought...
World Health Organization.
Yes.
Congress, yes.
And I said, if we start this now, everything will change. And it is 2020. And still, we have to fight. So at that moment, I was naive because I thought the whole world wants change. But the only thing I saw is that the change is not allowed because things have to be in place. And we call that white supremacy. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming. Thank you, everyone, our speakers. Max, thank you, Pakhuis de Zwijger, very much. And if you have any other questions, please feel free to add them as well. And we'll add some more information, as I said, to the site after this. So please come look at that. And again, thank you all very much. I've been super informed.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yes.